My stepbrother stabbed me in my sleep and my parents laughed in court when I testified. Hi, I'm Alfie, 28. And at exactly 2 a.m. on a Thursday, my stepbrother stabbed me in my own bed. My parents laughed about it, until the judge read his sentence out loud. They always say blood is thicker than water. What they never tell you is that sometimes, the people you call family will stand by and watch you bleed. Literally. But it didn't start that night. It started months earlier with whispers behind closed doors, gaslighting over dinner, and the slow, stomach-knotting realization that I was living in a house where the only rule was, believe Brandon, no matter what. That's my stepbrother. He's been in my life for about 2 years, ever since Mom married Philip. And from the minute they moved in, something was off. Brandon smiled too easily, showed up in my space too often, and always had the perfect excuse when I caught him somewhere he shouldn't be. I remember one night, I was 100% sure someone had been in my room. My dresser drawer, the one where I keep my journal, was half open. My charger was missing. I brought it up at dinner. "You're being paranoid again," Mom said, waving her fork like she was batting away my concerns. "Brandon said he was just looking for his phone charger. You probably grabbed it by mistake." "I don't keep chargers in my sock drawer," I said. Brandon grinned, like always. I knocked, "Alf. You had your headphones in. I didn't want to wake you. Just needed to plug in for a sec." Mom smiled like that explanation made perfect sense. Philip didn't even glance up from his soup. "Alfie," he said, "this is a family. Families trust each other. No locked doors. No secrets." Right. I wanted to believe I was overreacting. I wanted to believe I wasn't spiraling into conspiracy mode. But then I started losing things. Notebooks. Headphones. Prescription sleep meds. And when I mentioned that to Mom, "You probably took more than you remember and forgot," she said. "It happens." When I said there were exactly 8 missing pills? "Maybe you miscounted," Brandon chimed in, practically glowing. That night, I vented to my best friend, Ty. Over milkshakes and fries at the all-night diner, he looked at me like I'd just handed him a horror script. "Alf," he said, "this is bad. Like really bad. You ever think about putting a camera in your room?" I had an old phone from high school. Still worked. That night, I propped it up on my bookshelf facing the bed. I figured maybe I'd catch Brandon rifling through my stuff again. What I caught was way worse. 3 days later, I watched the footage with Ty on his cracked laptop screen, his hand clamped over his mouth the whole time. There was Brandon, entering my room at 1:47 a.m., going through my backpack, stealing $40 from my wallet, flipping through my journal, and then, just standing at the foot of my bed, watching me sleep. For 7 minutes straight. I sent the video to Mom and Philip. I told them we needed to talk. I thought maybe, finally, this would be the moment they believed me. It wasn't. That night after dinner, I connected the old phone to the living room TV. I played the video while Mom sat on the couch clutching a throw pillow and Philip stared like I'd just wasted their time. When the video ended, the silence was ice cold. "This proves nothing," Philip said. "He was clearly just looking for something. He watched me sleep. Maybe he was worried about you," Mom offered. "You've been acting so paranoid lately. Setting up secret cameras?" "That's not normal behavior, Alfie." Philip stood up. "Delete the video. We're not doing spy games in this house. I left that night. Or at least I tried to. But I didn't make it out before 2 a.m. Before the knife. Before the hospital. Before the questions. And before everything changed. The pain didn't feel real at first. It was white-hot and distant, like it was happening to someone else's body. I remember the blur of Brandon's face above me, his hand clutching the kitchen knife, and the way his voice shook when he said, "I know what you're trying to do to me. It's not going to work." Then he ran. I woke up hours later in a hospital bed, tubes in my arm, painkillers dripping through my veins, and a dull ache radiating from the bandages on my left side. The room smelled like antiseptic and betrayal. Detective Ramirez was sitting beside me, wearing the same expression my high school counselor used to wear, somewhere between concerned and cautious. "Alfie," he said, flipping open a small notepad. "I need you to walk me through it again. Take your time." I took a breath and told him everything. The camera. The missing meds. The gaslighting. The footage. The knife. Brandon. When I finished, he shut the notebook, his jaw tight. Your mom's reaction when we first questioned her," he said slowly, "was to laugh. Did you know that?" I closed my eyes. "Yeah. That sounds about right. And your stepfather said you've got a history of attention-seeking behavior. Care to comment on that?" "Yeah," I said. "It's called being ignored until you start screaming." Ty showed up not long after. His hoodie was inside out, and his sneakers were untied, like he'd just run out of the house. "They finally let me in," he said, eyes glossy. "I've been in that waiting room for hours." He didn't ask questions. Just pulled a chair close and grabbed my hand like I was about to float away. Then my therapist walked in. Dr. Kaplan. I'd been seeing her since my biological dad passed away in a factory explosion 5 years ago. She wasn't dramatic. She didn't need to be. She came armed with a folder thick enough to be a textbook. "I've already spoken to the detectives," she told me, laying the folder on the tray table. "And I'll be giving them every session note relevant to your home environment. Your anxiety. Your concerns about Brandon. There is no documented history of self-harm. No erratic behavior. You've been rational and increasingly fearful. And now we know why." When she left, Ty leaned close. "You're gonna be okay," he said. "They believe you now." I nodded, but inside, something still felt broken. Because being believed after nearly dying didn't feel like justice. It felt like a receipt. A receipt for every ignored warning, every dismissed fear, every moment my own mother looked at me like I was crazy for not trusting the boy who would later try to gut me in my sleep. Later that night, a nurse told me my parents had tried to visit. The staff turned them away. Good. Because if they'd walked in then, I don't know what would have hurt more, the stitches in my side or the fact that they'd still call it an accident. 3 days later, Brandon was arrested. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like being handed a lifeboat after the ship's already sunk. Detective Ramirez came back with a second officer, a woman named Detective Chin, sharp eyes, no-nonsense voice. "We've started talking to people at your school, Alfie," she said. 3 students already came forward. Ty sat beside me, silent, arms crossed like he was daring anyone to challenge my version of the truth. "2 of the students say Brandon used to brag about watching you sleep. Said it like it was a joke," Chin continued. "A third, Tyler Simmons, told us Brandon was selling your sleep medication. Said he kept it in his gym locker." My stomach dropped. "What?" I asked. "Like, how much proof do you need?" Ramirez nodded. "We searched the locker. Found your meds. Along with a few items that didn't belong to him. Turns out he's been stealing from more than just you." He handed me a printed evidence photo. There was my pill bottle, labeled with my name, next to a stack of student IDs and a half-dozen small electronics. But it was the final piece that made it real. "The knife he used?" Chin said. "We found it in your backyard trash can. His fingerprints are all over it." I should have felt relief. I should have smiled. But my first question was, "And what did my parents say when you told them?" Ramirez hesitated. "They laughed. Your mom said the charges would never stick. That you're known for making things up." I stared at him, my mouth dry. "Even after the video?" "They're still defending him," he confirmed. "But the DA isn't buying it." Dr. Kaplan returned that afternoon with her signature leather folder. "I've compiled everything from the past 18 months, she said. "Documented escalation. Alfie's reports of missing items. Fear. Paranoia tied directly to one individual. It's all time-stamped and cross-referenced." She handed it to Detective Chin, who accepted it like it was gold. Because, in this case, it was. Later that night, Ty pulled his chair so close to my bed his knees bumped the frame. "You're not crazy," he said. "You're not dramatic. You're not attention-seeking. You're a guy who tried everything to keep himself safe, and no one listened." I couldn't speak. My throat burned with unshed rage. "Your mom and Philip," he continued, "have been telling people in the waiting room that you did this to yourself. That you're unstable. That Brandon's the real victim." He reached into his backpack, pulled out his laptop, and hit play on an audio recording. It was from the hospital lobby. Philip's voice, low and furious. "He stabbed himself. Probably hallucinating. Always had a flair for drama. Then Moms. We never should have let him keep that camera." All it did was fuel his obsession. It was like being stabbed all over again, only this time, in the heart. The world had finally started to believe me, But the two people who were supposed to love me most? They were still defending my would-be killer. My stepbrother was in custody. But the war wasn't over. Because now, it was me against my family. And I was just getting started. I was discharged from the hospital 2 weeks later with a stitched-up side, a list of trauma therapists, and a protective order against my own stepbrother. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Instead, I moved into Ty's place. His mom barely blinked when I showed up with a duffel bag and a hospital bracelet still around my wrist. She just nodded and said, "Guest room's clean. Shoes off at the door." The preliminary hearing was set for the following week. Brandon was being held in juvenile detention, and the charges were official: assault with a deadly weapon, theft, unlawful possession of a controlled substance. But the kicker? My parents still hadn't called. Scratch that, they had called. They just never said the right things. The voicemails were a carousel of denial, rage, and gaslight-flavored guilt trips. "You need to drop these charges, Alfie," Philip growled in one. "You're destroying this family. This is tearing your mother apart." Mom wept in another. Brandon didn't mean it. He was confused. Right. Confused by the knife he carried into my room. Ty and I listened to the voicemails one night while eating leftover lasagna on his bedroom floor. "This is psychological warfare," he muttered halfway through Mom's 6th voicemail of the day. Then came the text. "From MOM, can we please talk like a family?" I didn't reply. But Ty did. He took my phone, typed out one sentence, and hit send before I could stop him. "From Alfie, you made your choice the night you chose his story over my blood." The next day, the court hearing arrived. I wore my one decent button-up shirt. Ty's mom braided my hair so the scar on my temple was visible. "Let them see what they did," she said. Brandon walked into the courtroom in a baggy orange jumpsuit, eyes low, shackled at the ankles. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not less dangerous, just deflated. When he saw me, he muttered under his breath, "You're ruining everything." Detective Ramirez was already 2 steps behind him. "Did everyone hear that?" he said loudly enough for the court reporter to look up. Mom and Philip arrived moments later. Mom in a navy dress that screamed church innocence, Philip in his one tailored suit, jaw tight as concrete. They didn't even look at me. The prosecutor laid everything out: footage, fingerprints, theft records, testimony from classmates, my medical records, and Dr. Kaplan's notes. Brandon's attorney tried the "he didn't mean to" route. Tried to paint me as paranoid, unstable, and attention-seeking. Then Brandon himself took the stand. And that's when it all fell apart. "I didn't mean to hurt him," he said. I wanted him to stop. To stop accusing me. To stop filming me. He was trying to ruin everything." The courtroom went dead quiet. Even Philip blinked. "So you did stab him?" the prosecutor asked, slow and steady. Brandon fidgeted, looked at my mom like she'd bail him out with a glance. "I didn't mean it to go that far. I was just trying to scare him. I didn't push the knife in deep. He's making it sound worse than it was." That was it. Confession on record in open court. Mom's eyes finally met mine. And for the first time in my life, she looked afraid of me. Not because I was dangerous, but because I was undeniable. 3 months passed between that hearing and sentencing day. I spent them learning how to breathe again. Which sounds dramatic, but it's not. When your entire sense of safety's been dismantled by people who share your roof, breathing, actual, honest breathing, becomes a skill you have to relearn. Like riding a bike after a crash. Ty's place became my new normal. His mom insisted I eat 3 meals a day. His little sister brought me homemade bracelets and zero judgment. We carved out a routine that felt safe, predictable. And that's when the voicemails started again. "Philip, you've made your point. Now stop this madness before it ruins your mother." "Mom, Brandon is facing real jail time. He's just a boy. You're his brother." Philip again, shouting this time. "Don't expect to ever step foot in this house again. You think this is justice? This is betrayal." Ty played each one on speaker, recording every second into a folder labeled Toxic Archives. Then came the live call. It was a Sunday night, and I was folding laundry when my phone rang. "Mom." Ty raised an eyebrow, and I nodded. He hit record on his laptop. "Alfie." She started, soft and broken like a woman in a Hallmark movie. "This has gone far enough." "What do you want, Mom?" To talk. As a family. We're not a family. I said. Families don't leave you bleeding and then blame you for staining the carpet. Philip's voice cut in, booming in the background. Drop the charges. You're ruining Brandon's future. He ruined mine with a kitchen knife. Enough with the dramatics, he snapped. No, enough with the gaslighting. There was a pause. Then Mom again, pleading. He's sorry. He admits he took your things. But stabbing? He says he didn't do that. He swears it. There's a video. There's a confession. His fingerprints are on the weapon. He's in custody. What more do you need? We need you to come home. That was the last straw. I don't need anything from you anymore, I said. And for the record? Brandon's not my brother. He never was. Ty ended the call with a single tap. The silence afterward was thick and satisfying. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Yeah. I think I finally am. That week, we walked into the Jefferson County Courthouse for sentencing. Brandon stood with his attorney, a public defender who looked like he hadn't slept in days. My stepbrother wore that same stupid smirk, until Judge Brennan entered the courtroom. She was short. Stern. The kind of woman who doesn't waste time on pleasantries. Before she even got to the sentence, she said, Let me be clear. What this court has witnessed is not just criminal behavior. It is a complete failure of parental responsibility, of accountability, and of basic human empathy. She turned to my parents, Linda and Philip Patterson. You enabled your son's behavior. You dismissed a brutal attack. And you smeared your own child to protect an illusion. Mom started to cry. Philip just clenched his jaw. Then she turned to me. Alfie Morris. This court commends your courage in the face of betrayal. Justice begins with someone refusing to stay silent. Thank you for speaking. And then, finally, she read the sentence. Brandon Patterson, Judge Brennan said, her voice slicing through the courtroom like steel wire. Please rise for sentencing. He stood, shaky, pale, trying to keep his jaw set like a man not entirely sure whether he should cry or play tough. His public defender stood beside him, looking down at his shoes. For the charge of assault with a deadly weapon, she continued, you are hereby sentenced to juvenile detention until the age of 21, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. You will undergo mandatory psychological evaluation, anger management, and a rehabilitation program that includes counseling and medication compliance. Brandon blinked. Then the second blow came. A permanent restraining order will also be issued, prohibiting you from any contact, direct or indirect, with Alfie Morris. For the rest of your life. Gasps echoed behind me. Ty squeezed my shoulder. I didn't blink. Judge Brennan turned to my mother and stepfather. Linda and Philip Patterson, please stand. They did. Slowly. He rigid. She trembling. For child endangerment and obstruction of justice, you are both sentenced to 18 months of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory parenting and family accountability courses. You are to have no contact with Alfie Morris unless he initiates it. Additionally, you are to cover all medical, legal, and therapeutic costs associated with your son's recovery, including pain and suffering damages, as determined by the court. Philip flinched. Mom sobbed. But I didn't look away. Let me be clear. The judge added, her voice rising with something almost like fury. Your laughter at your son's accusations. Your mocking of his trauma. Your protection of a predator. These actions are not only morally bankrupt, they are criminally negligent. This court finds your behavior reprehensible. You failed your son. And you failed yourselves. The gavel came down like thunder. Sentence delivered. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs. My lawyer leaned in, whispering congratulations. Dr. Kaplan smiled from 2 rows back. Ty was already halfway to tears. And my mother? She waited for me in the hallway. Her voice wobbled as she stepped into my path. Alfie, she said. Please. We were wrong. We see that now. We made terrible, awful mistakes. I looked at her. Not through her. At her. It's a little late for that, Mom. We love you. She whispered. We always have. I shook my head. You loved the version of me who stayed quiet. Who let you pretend nothing was happening. But me? The real me? You buried him a long time ago. Philip stepped forward, eyes bloodshot. We can still fix this. No, I said. You made your choice the second you called me a liar from a hospital bed. But we're your parents, she said. Not anymore. I turned and walked away, Ty beside me. I didn't look back. That evening, we went to the same diner where this whole thing had first started unraveling, the one with the sticky menus, the always burning coffee, and the booth where I'd once whispered to Ty, "I think Brandon's been in my room." But this time, we weren't whispering. Ty, Dr. Kaplan, Detective Ramirez, and I sat in the corner booth like some oddball victory team. The waitress recognized us from the news coverage and gave us our first round of burgers on the house. I think it was her version of a standing ovation. "To Alfie," Ramirez said, raising his glass of water like it was champagne. "One of the bravest damn kids I've ever worked with." "I'm not brave," I said. "I just got stabbed and refused to shut up about it." "Same thing," Dr. Kaplan said with a soft smile. We laughed. It felt strange. Laughter. Like it belonged to someone else's life. The conversation drifted, to future plans, to therapy, to the process of rebuilding. I was looking into college options again. I'd dropped out a semester before the attack. Anxiety. Panic. Sleepwalking through classes. Now, I was thinking criminal justice. Or maybe social work. Something useful. Ty nudged me. "You'd make a hell of a counselor, you know. Just don't stab anyone during intake. Only if they touch my charger." Everyone laughed. But there was something else in the air too, quiet, thick, unspoken. A kind of peace. Not the celebratory kind. Not fireworks or ticker tape. Just the kind that comes after the storm ends and you finally, believe the walls aren't about to cave in again. As we were finishing dessert, I didn't even like pie, but tonight I ordered 2 slices. Ty asked the question I hadn't dared answer yet. "What happens with your parents now?" I stared at the melting whipped cream on my plate. "Nothing," I said. "There is no next chapter for them in my story. Not unless I write it." Dr. Kaplan reached into her bag and handed me a thick envelope. Her notes. Copies of the testimony. A letter from the DA. "Consider this," she said. "Your proof. If you ever start to question yourself again." "I already have," I admitted. "But I'm learning." That night, Ty and I walked back to his place under streetlights that buzzed like quiet applause. I looked up at the stars and thought about the version of me that used to live for approval. Who tiptoed through a house full of landmines. That version was gone. Not dead. Not forgotten. Just, finally free. I moved into a small studio apartment the following month. It wasn't fancy, linoleum floors, a water heater that coughed when you asked too much of it, but it was mine. Every inch of it. No locks being questioned. No doors barged through in the middle of the night. No gaslighting over missing items or rewritten truths. Just silence, and the occasional distant yell from the neighbor who really loved reality TV. Peace, it turned out, was loud in all the right ways. My mom sent 2 letters in that first month. One typed, one handwritten. Both full of the same hollow phrases. "We didn't know. We were scared. Please come home. He's your brother." I didn't respond. I kept them in a drawer labeled Ghosts, right underneath a printout of my restraining order and the DA's sentencing summary. There are some doors you close with a key. Others you just don't open again. Ty helped me set up my new space. He brought a lava lamp and a hand-me-down desk. His mom gifted me a rice cooker and a roll of toilet paper like it was a blessing. "You gonna be okay?" he asked after dropping the last box of books. I nodded. "Yeah. I think I finally am. I started therapy twice a week. Dr. Kaplan called it emotional PT. Like trying to walk again after someone's taken a bat to your knees. It hurt. A lot. But there were wins. I stopped flinching at night sounds. I started trusting my own memory again. I learned how to speak without trying to soften the edges. At the end of one session, she asked, "Do you want to see them again? Ever?" I thought about it. I thought about the knife. About Brandon's voice in the dark. About Mom laughing. About Philip calling me dramatic with blood on the floor. "No," I said. "I want to live a life where I never need them again." She nodded. "That's a good answer." That fall, I enrolled part-time in community college. Intro to Sociology. Foundations of Criminology. Trauma and Recovery. I sat in the back row, quiet but focused. One day, we had a guest speaker, Detective Ramirez. He spotted me right away. "Alfie," he said after class, clapping my shoulder. You look taller. Pain stretches people. I joked. He didn't laugh. Just looked at me and said, Proud of you, kid? It landed harder than I expected. That weekend, I took a walk to the park alone. Sat by the lake. Watched ducks fight over nothing. Watched a dad teach his kid how to skip rocks. And for the first time in over a year, I felt like maybe, just maybe, my life wasn't a survival story anymore. Maybe it was the beginning of something else. Something mine. Winter came fast. The kind of cold that makes your lungs sting when you breathe too deep. I bought my first coat that didn't used to belong to someone else. Midnight blue. Heavy. Warm. It felt like armor. I wore it the first time I visited the old neighborhood. No one knew I was coming. Not Ty, not Dr. Kaplan, not even my therapist's backup voicemail. I just needed to see it, my former house, the one where I almost died, where they told me my truth didn't matter as much as keeping the peace. The yard was the same. Weeds curling at the edges, the front gate still missing that hinge Dad never got around to fixing. Mom's car sat in the driveway. Philip's truck beside it. The porch light flickered like it couldn't decide if it wanted to stay on. I didn't go to the door. I didn't want confrontation. I just wanted closure. I stood across the street for a long time, watching. Waiting for something, an apology, a sign, some gravitational pull that told me there was a path back. There wasn't. I turned and walked away before they ever knew I was there. When I got home, Ty was waiting on the stairs to my apartment, 2 coffees in a tray and a donut bag between his teeth. You ghosted me, he said around the pastry. Rude. Sorry, I muttered. You okay? I sat beside him and looked out over the quiet street. I think so. I went to the old house. You see anyone? Nope. Just ghosts. We drank coffee in silence. Later that week, I received a certified letter from the Patterson household. Inside was a Christmas card, those glossy ones with the fake snow background, and a short, typed message. We hope you're safe. We miss you. Brandon is struggling. Maybe one day, we can all be a family again. I read it once. Then I shredded it. The real family didn't send cards like that. The real family didn't demand a comeback tour. The real family had already showed up. Ty Dr. Kaplan, Detective Ramirez, even Ty's mom with her lasagna and quiet strength. And me. I showed up for myself. That was new. And huge. I started volunteering at a youth shelter the next week. Not because it erased anything, but because I knew what it felt like to not be believed. To be surrounded by people who smiled to your face and sharpened knives behind the door. There were kids there just like me. Some quieter. Some louder. But all of them haunted. I didn't tell them my story. I just showed up. Every week. Same time. Same warmth. And over time, they started to believe I wasn't going to vanish. That I wasn't another adult full of apologies with no action. Funny thing about showing up for someone else? You start believing in yourself a little more, too. The youth center talk went better than I expected. Afterward, a kid about 15 with a buzz cut and eyes too tired for his age came up and said, How do you know it was bad enough to leave? I didn't have a rehearsed answer. So I told him the truth. When I realized I was more afraid of staying than I was of starting over. He nodded. Didn't say anything else. But I watched him sit a little taller during the closing circle. Like maybe he felt a little less alone. Back at my apartment that night, I stared at the folder of court documents I keep tucked in a drawer marked Keep. Not out of fear. Not revenge. Just to remember. To remind myself where I came back from. There are days when it still hits me, random, quiet days. I'll be in line at the grocery store or brushing my teeth, and suddenly the memory hits, the hallway light, the click of my door, the whisper, the blade. But the difference now? I don't flinch. I breathe through it. Sometimes I even say it out loud, like an incantation. That was then. This is now. I've started applying to schools out of state. Somewhere new. Somewhere no one calls me the kid who was stabbed by his stepbrother. Just Alfie. Just a guy who survived something brutal and decided he wasn't going to let it be the only thing people knew about him. Ty's still around. Always is. He's been teaching me to drive stick shift for some reason, says it's a rite of passage for real adulthood. Even though I nearly drove us into a mailbox last week. We laugh a lot. That's new. I'm starting to imagine a future that doesn't revolve around survival. One that includes late-night pancakes without hidden motives. One with maybe a dog. Maybe a degree. Maybe even peace that doesn't feel borrowed. The scar's still there. So is the story. But I don't wear it like armor anymore. It's just part of me. Not all of me. The night before the panel, I stood in front of my mirror rehearsing what I was going to say. I'd been asked to speak for just 10 minutes. That was the rule. 10 minutes about trauma, healing, and what it means to survive when the people closest to you are the ones who tried to erase you. I had 3 pages of bullet points. I used none of them. When I stepped up to the mic the next day, the lights were bright, but the room was small, folding chairs, donated muffins, a stack of pamphlets on a back table titled, "What to Do When No One Believes You." I looked out at a sea of strangers. Some with tear tracks already on their cheeks. Some with their arms crossed so tight they looked folded into themselves. A couple kids. A handful of older women. One man who didn't lift his eyes the entire time. I took a breath. "I don't know if I'm qualified to be up here," I began. "I'm not a therapist. I'm not a professional. I'm just a guy who got stabbed in his sleep by someone who was supposed to be my brother." No gasps. No laughter. Just that tense, unblinking kind of silence. "My mom laughed when the cops asked about it," I said. "My stepdad said I did it for attention. For months, I believed them. Even after I had proof. Even after I nearly died. That's what happens when people rewrite your reality so many times, you stop trusting your own eyes." I paused. Someone sniffled. Ty sat in the front row. Gave me the smallest nod. "Just enough. But I'm not here to tell you how to heal," I continued. "I'm here to say this: you don't need their apology to move on. You don't need their approval to rebuild. You just need your own permission to matter." Afterward, a dozen people came up to talk. One woman told me she hadn't spoken to her mother in 18 years and hearing my story made her feel, not crazy. Another kid asked if it was okay to be angry. I told him, "God, yes. Just don't let it rot you from the inside out." When I got home that night, there was a message in my inbox from the event organizer. Subject: "Would you ever consider turning this into a book?" I stared at it for a long time. A year ago, I was in a hospital bed wondering if I'd ever feel human again. Now people wanted my words in print. I didn't respond right away. But I started writing. 1 page. Then 2. Then 7. Not for revenge. Not even for justice. But because if someone, somewhere, is sitting on their floor right now wondering if they're crazy for feeling unsafe in their own home. I want them to know they're not. I want them to know they're not alone. A few weeks later, something happened that I hadn't even realized I was avoiding. I saw Brandon's face again. Not in person. In a news article. Apparently, there'd been an incident at the juvenile facility, minor, but enough to make the local paper's police blotter. A scuffle over a stolen hoodie. Brandon's name wasn't listed outright. He's still a minor, but the description was unmistakable. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I missed him. Not because I felt guilty. Because I didn't feel anything. Not rage. Not fear. Not even relief. Just emptiness. Like whatever tether had once held us in the same orbit had finally snapped. That night, I walked to the little bakery near my apartment. The one that always smells like vanilla and clove and plays Sinatra even when no one's inside. I sat at the corner table with a coffee and a notebook, watching the world move by like it didn't even know what I'd survived. A girl at the next table had a deep scar across her cheek. Faint but real. She caught me looking, and for a second, we just stared at each other, not awkward, not embarrassed. Just understanding. She nodded once. I nodded back. No words exchanged. No stories shared. But that moment said everything. When I got home, I found a postcard in my mailbox. It was from Eliana. A photo of the coast. Bright colors. On the back. "Your speech made me cry. If you ever want to grab coffee, no pressure. E. Asterisk." I smiled like an idiot for a full minute before sticking it on the fridge with a magnet that said breathe, then fight. I didn't text her right away. But I would. Eventually. Because this version of me, the one who takes his time, who doesn't jump at every flicker of attention or guilt trip, that version deserves people who show up gently. No demands. No manipulation. No apologies offered like bait. Just presence. Just honesty. Just forward motion. The first time I went swimming again, I hesitated at the edge for almost 10 minutes. There's something about water, about exposing scarred skin in broad daylight, about giving your body over to something vast and quiet, that feels more vulnerable than therapy. Ty had dragged me to the community pool on a hot Saturday afternoon, all sunburned toddlers and screaming lifeguards. I didn't want to go. He didn't care. "You've been in survival mode so long," he said, tossing me a towel. "You forgot what living feels like." I stood by the pool steps in shorts and a shirt I didn't want to take off. The scar on my side was healed, but in my head it still glowed like a target. A reminder. A map of a night no one should survive. "You okay?" Ty asked, already chest deep, squinting against the sun. "Yeah," I lied. Then I peeled off the shirt and stepped into the water. Cold. Shockingly cold. I sank to my shoulders, heart thudding harder than I expected, and just floated. Eyes closed. Ears underwater. World muted. For the first time in over a year, I let myself feel weightless. Not in danger. Not on edge. Just unmoored in the best possible way. Afterward, we got popsicles from a guy with a pushcart and sat on the curb like we were 10 again. Mine melted faster than I could eat it. Ty didn't say anything about the scar. He didn't have to. He knew what that swim meant. Back at home, I stood in front of the mirror. Looked at the pale pink line on my side. Touched it. Didn't wince. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was proof. I lived. One afternoon, I found myself in the stationery aisle at a bookstore, staring at a rack of blank journals. I hadn't kept a journal since Brandon used to read them. Back then, writing felt like confession. Now it felt like temptation. A dare. I picked up a black hardcover, smooth and weighty in my hands, and flipped it open. First page. This time, no one reads this but me. I bought it. Took it home. Sat on my bed and opened it like it might bite. And I started writing, not about what happened. Not the trauma. I'd written that story already, in 100 forms. The police reports. The court testimony. The blog post that went semi-viral. The speech. This was something different. This was me writing about now. How I loved the smell of laundry warm from the dryer. How the sun hit my window at exactly 4:23 p.m. How Eliana texted me. "I just saw a dog that looked like it had a PhD. And it made me laugh harder than anything all week. How my body still stiffened when I heard footsteps behind me, but only for a second now, and how that second kept getting shorter. The journal wasn't a witness anymore. It was a mirror. Later that night, I lit a candle for no reason at all. Just because I liked the way the flame danced on the wall. Ty came over and rolled his eyes at it. "Who are you?" he joked. "Scented candles? A journal? Should I be worried you're becoming emotionally stable? Terrifying, isn't it?" He laughed, kicked off his shoes, and flopped on the couch. We watched reruns. Ate too much popcorn. Argued about nothing. At some point I realized, this felt like healing. Not the dramatic kind. Not the kind with grand speeches or perfect closure. Just the quiet, boring, safe kind. And I could live with that. Hell, I wanted to. About a month later, I got a DM from someone I hadn't spoken to since middle school. "No. Hey. No warm up. Just. Was it really that bad? Or are you exaggerating for attention?" I didn't respond. Didn't need to. But I sat with it. Not because I doubted myself, those days were gone, but because it reminded me just how deep denial runs in some people. Especially when the truth makes them uncomfortable. I showed it to Dr. Kaplan at our next session. She raised an eyebrow. "You feel triggered?" "No," I said. "I feel bored." She laughed. "That's a sign of healing, you know." We talked about how I used to crave everyone's belief, how badly I wanted validation from people who never earned a seat at that table. Now, I was curating my peace like a playlist. Only good energy gets in. I even started setting boundaries online, unapologetically. Unfollowed anyone who made my skin crawl. Soft-blocked 2 extended family members who just wanted to ask some questions. Put my Instagram on private. Ty called it my quiet era. "Next thing you know," he said, "you'll be meditating and quoting Brené Brown. I'll start charging for my trauma TED Talks." I joked. But the truth was, I liked this version of me. Not hardened. Not bitter. Just clear. Like I'd finally sanded off everyone else's expectations and was getting a sense of my own shape. One night, Eliana and I went for a late walk down by the water. There were lights strung across the bridge, swaying gently in the breeze. She told me about her latest photo series, how she was capturing small, overlooked moments. Hands on subway rails. Stray dogs at bus stops. Everything's always been big with me, she said. Big drama. Big heartbreak. But I think I'm finally learning to see the quiet stuff. Me too, I said. Turns out, the quiet stuff saves your life. We walked in silence for a while after that. It didn't feel awkward. It felt earned. I went back to the hospital. Not as a patient. This time, I walked in through the front doors with a visitor badge clipped to my hoodie and a folder under my arm. Inside, flyers for a new peer support program at the youth shelter. The same one I'd started volunteering with months ago. Dr. Harper, the trauma unit counselor, met me in the lobby. She looked exactly the same, bun, blazer, kind eyes, the whole therapist starter pack. I didn't think I'd ever see you walk back in here, she said, smiling softly. I didn't think I'd ever want to, I admitted. But here I am. We toured the recovery ward where I'd once laid bleeding and humiliated while my mother told detectives I was just jealous of Brandon. The walls looked smaller now. The bed rails less intimidating. I paused in front of the room I had once called a war zone. I hated this place, I murmured. But it saved me. Dr. Harper nodded. That's usually how it works. We posted the flyers on the bulletin board by the nurses' station. One of the nurses glanced at the header, Peer Voices, for survivors, by survivors. She looked up. This yours? Partly, I said. The good parts. Afterward, I walked the long way back to my apartment. Past a group of teenagers outside a 7-Eleven. One of them had the same haircut Brandon used to have. Same swagger, too. For a second, my chest tightened. Then I blinked. And it passed. That's the thing about trauma no one tells you. It doesn't vanish. It doesn't pack its bags and leave after therapy and forgiveness and time. It lingers. It tests the locks. It stands outside your window sometimes, just to make sure you're still paying attention. But you get stronger. You stop inviting it in. Back at home, I made dinner. Just for me. Turned on music that didn't remind me of anything. Lit a candle that smelled like oranges and safety. And I wrote in my journal. Page 74. Today I walked through my past and didn't shatter. A year ago, I was bleeding out in my own bed while the people who raised me defended the boy holding the knife. They said I was jealous. Dramatic. Delusional. But here's the truth. I didn't just survive. I resurrected. I rebuilt myself from a hospital bed to a podium. From a dismissed voice to a name on advocacy panels. From someone who was silenced to someone who now teaches others how to speak like their life depends on it. Because sometimes it does. I've testified. I've written. I've stood in front of kids who flinch at kindness because they were taught that love leaves bruises, and I've told them, you are not what they did to you. You are what you choose next. And I chose this. A life where my trauma is not my title. A home with locks that stay locked. A future that belongs to me. People ask me what happened to Brandon. He's exactly where he belongs. They ask about my parents. They lost their son the moment they decided protecting a lie was easier than facing the truth. And me? I gained something better than their approval. I gained myself. My voice. My freedom. My fire. And every single morning I wake up in a room my own, breathing air they didn't poison, living a life I carved out of glass and grit. I win again. This scar on my side? It's not a wound anymore. It's a landmark. It says, here is where the boy ended. And the warrior began. This scar on my side? It's not a wound anymore. It's a landmark. It says, here is where the boy ended. And the warrior began. And if they ever try to rewrite that story, if they ever say it wasn't that bad, or I was confused, or I'm exaggerating, I'll point to the court records. The police reports. The empty seat at every table I no longer beg to be invited to. I don't live in their house anymore. I don't live in their version of me. I live in my truth. And it's louder than their denial will ever be. So let them whisper. Let them lie. Let them call it family. I call it freedom. Because I made it out. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure others do too. We survive. We rise. And when we speak, they listen.